Okay, so like the Muslim Brotherhood, for example, they've been labeled a terrorist organization by the United States, and at the same time, they're an official political party in some other countries. And I just wonder if is the United States maybe mischaracterizing? Like, are they technically a radical group, or are they more of like are they more centrist? Like, where do they stand, and why does the United States tend to look at them as radical?
Oh boy.
Oh, because they're radical.
Okay.
They're getting direct funding by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Like that's their MO. They go around and try and they're trying to implement. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. But hang on, you just said, okay, so hang on. The United States funds Saudi Arabia, which then funds the Muslim Brotherhood, which then the United States labels a terrorist organization?
Yeah, pretty much. It's pretty screwed, man.
That has like what? Go ahead, sorry.
But yeah, so
boy.
they've the Muslim Brotherhood has been trying to kind of take hold in these countries for a very long time. But like I said, the secular leaders like Nasser in Egypt, he kicked them out. Any reasonable leader kicks these people out because they don't want to deal with their nonsense, right? But now that the societies are so fractured, they've been able to seep their way in a lot more easily than they could have before. We don't have these strong nationalist secular leaders to prevent these people from coming in, and that's what we're dealing with now. Even you can see a microcosm of this, like in Israel, when they were going up against the PLO, and the PLO in itself was this secular organization. They thought, oh, maybe we should start supporting these Islamists because they pose a greater threat to the PLO, and they're not as organized. We don't have to deal with this BS. So they started indirectly supporting Hamas. By the way, none of what I'm saying is some crazy conspiracy, so don't take it that way.
Check it up on Google.
Oh, this is like the classified information. That's fine.
Yeah, Mossad is going to kick in my door in 3 seconds.
Yeah, right.
No!
I'm going to show up on Ben Shapiro's show with like a gag
bag on your head.
You better advocate for the greater state of Israel right now. Anyway, so Israel started supporting their Islamists in a certain way, which was Hamas, and now they're kind of dealing with what they've created as well. But yeah, you see it everywhere.
Sorry, I mean I keep interrupting. My apologies. But then, okay, so if people like the Muslim Brotherhood or Hamas, like as I understand, both these groups have gotten political power. Am I correct? Like at least one of them have.
Yeah.
I understand.
The Muslim Brotherhood got into power in Egypt, and Hamas obviously in Gaza.
So then, does that mean that maybe those populations are becoming more radical? Because if us three can agree that these groups are radical in general and in their ideology and implementation of that ideology, then does that mean that their populations who have democratically voted them in are also becoming more radicalized?
Well, it's like I said, when a population is under duress, they're more likely to vote for extremists, right? I'm sure if you took the U.S. and you impose the same type of atmosphere and the same type of hardships, people would start being radicalized and going to whatever denomination they are, and that's their in-group, right? You see it with race, with religion. The difference is that they're homogenous societies, so they don't have to. Well, actually, even within the countries that are not homogenous, like Iraq, they're starting to push away the other races as well. But in Gaza, they're all homogenous, so they don't have races to push away. So instead, they start, devoting themselves to this religious in-group. But under the PLO, that were making some really good strives for their population, you didn't really see that, especially because all their neighboring countries followed the same type of ideology. When Iraq was prosperous, you didn't see people going around and killing each other because they were Assyrian or Chaldean or Armenian. They cooperated and coexisted pretty well. But now that it's total crap in Iraq, people are more likely to hesitate when an Assyrian approaches them and they want to do business. They're not really going to trust them, or they'll attack them, as is the case right now.
So then, maybe not to the same degree, but do you think that's kind of like a parallel to what's going on in U.S. politics today, where you see a lot of people resorting to identity politics and resorting to tribalism where they just find their own in group and they just stick to that group, and that's their own people, and everybody else is like an enemy or a combatant. And you see like the election of, say, Donald Trump, which is very much almost like like a quote unquote extremist for American politics, because he's not of typical form. So, I mean, it kind of seems to be like not necessarily so extreme because there's not like bombings and stuff, but
I want to preface this with, there was an abrupt pause in the last conversation, and that was because my screen turned blank, and I thought my computer was about to shut off for like an automatic restart, and I got really scared. So that's just some comedy for you guys.
It's the Mossad. It's the Mossad.
Yeah, I was like, I put a virus on my computer. They don't want me talking about this.
Everything's alright. I don't know what you're talking about. Sorry. Bye.
they're already on to us. Oh no, it's those journalists, you guys. They're coming for
Yeah.
you.
We're just role playing.
But yeah, this is, I don't know, in America you do see it because we're seeing a lot of like democratic socialists being elected right now. One of them just beat a really a corporate Democrat in New York for the House of Representatives, I believe. And it's gaining in popularity, this type of like what we consider far leftist ideology. And then we see on the right-hand side there's a rise in these types of nationalist groups like the Richard Spencer types and the alt-right or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it is happening to a certain, but the U.S. is such a stable economy, and they don't allow foreign influence as much as people would like to believe there is. There's no foreign influence affecting the government, besides the lobbies, which we can debate about that later. But
Yeah.
I don't foresee anything extreme happening unless the economy went totally into chaos, and that would be the main reason.
True, yeah, and that tends to be what pushes most people is, as soon as I often say this in my own podcast, I say comfort breeds conformity, and it's because like in the United States, everyone's so comfortable because we have a stable economy, stable government. No one has to like face any real true hardships. It's just first world problems for most people, and I don't know. It's just
Yeah,
the world
I think
is. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're good.
I think the situation in Europe is a lot more different because they have the influx of refugees, and as a result, I think any minor or major change in the economic status of people living there, it would kind of be a tipping point, and you'd see more. You see more like nationalist groups coming out, more hardline groups coming out, anti-immigration. But here in America, we have a really strong vetting process for legal immigrants. And as a result, we see a lot of immigrants that come in that contribute more. They have a higher annual salary, more degrees, and on average than the general population. But that's, again, because we have a good vetting process and we want to take in these qualified individuals. Mm-hmm. In Europe, I think Tariq can attest to the amount of Somalis that are inhabiting his local area.
Yeah,
but
can we talk about
they
that?
have a lot more.
Let's like completely diverge from the outline, because I often hear and this is always like, so okay, just from some background, like my family's heritage is from Sweden, so I thought it was so cool that not only are you studying similar majors as I am, but like you're also studying in where my people hail from. It's kind of cool.
So we was Vikings and shit.
Yeah. I'm like the whitest of white people,
Oh, so white.
So white. Seriously, I can't hold a tan for more than like 12 hours. I just burn, peel, white again. It's terrible. And I live in Florida, man. So like Florida beaches like every other day, still white as hell. Like I look like I don't know, like the moon. It's ridiculous. But
the indoor lifestyle.
Yeah, that's true. So like with a lot of like critics, they say that Sweden has basically like lost this like homogeneity or whatever, homogeneity or whatever however you want to pronounce it. But because of the influx of refugees in the last 5-6 years, so since you're there, what do you see? Because when I was in Sweden last, I was actually assisted by a Muslim woman with, she had like the whole setup going on, and she like helped us out because we were like lost, and we were essentially looking for a place to camp because we found out about some law that lets us
all men's
camp
rights.
Anywhere. Yeah, exactly, where you like, as long as you're not causing any problems and you don't leave any trash, just you're fine. And I thought that was cool, so we decided to camp for the night. But she was very kind and stuff, but people often say that Sweden's lost its Swedish touch because now it's full of refugees. And what's the reality on the ground?
Right. I gotta say that I just cringe at that kind of stuff because, of course, like you have been exposed to all they say about Sweden. Even before coming to Sweden, I thought, oh, it's gonna be a refugee show or something like that. No, it's absolutely not what they say. And I must say that Sweden is in a reality that's much less chaotic as in many countries throughout Europe. To begin with, it's interesting that just because someone is from outside of Europe, is an immigrant or a refugee, they're not able to integrate into the society. They're just going to be always a foreign element, which I disagree completely. The idea is that indeed Sweden has been seeing its share of a lot of refugees, especially if you take into proportion of the population. For instance, in 2015, if I'm not mistaken, Sweden welcomed 100,000 refugees, which was second only to Germany, which welcomed 400,000 asylum seekers. Jesus. And we got to see that Sweden has 9 million people. Germany has almost 80, no, over 80. So there's of course a proportion here, over proportion. But what I must say that the main problem here is that the countries choose more to accommodate so many people, such an influx. If I'm not mistaken, the full figure is 400,000 incomers since 2010 or something like that. And of course, it's going to put in a strain into the population. Of course, I mean, you just brought in 5% more people, plus the natural growth, because Sweden has been growing a lot. So of course you're going to have a lot of strains, but I would say that most of these strains, for now, are in the economic and more in the economic sphere, especially when it comes to housing, because housing in Sweden has increased in price by a lot. That's a trend you'll be seeing in Europe, but in Sweden it's been way ahead. You see property prices rising by 70% in just 5 years. I'll say that's the first one, and second one is also a lot of strain in public services. The Scandinavian countries are always been famous by the from cradle to the grave welfare system, and indeed, if you just increase the population all of a sudden, of course you're going to have a lot of strains into that welfare system, especially because most of this population that's coming here is not going to integrate into the welfare, contribute to the welfare system so fast. Even if some of them are doctors, some of them are nurses that might contribute to healthcare or teachers, they still need to integrate into the society. They still need to learn about the Swedish specific skills, not only the Swedish language, but how the system works, what you're supposed to teach, what you're supposed to, how you're supposed to contribute. So of course it's going to take time. I think now, after the pains of birth had been suffered, the situation is changing. The situation is they're starting to integrate much better. And one thing that might have helped in that process is that Sweden is growing a lot. It's been the best economic, how to say, the most prosperous economic period in over 40 years. So of course things are going fine. So as I said, comfort breeds conformity. So as long as everyone is employed and not saying, oh, that refugee took my job, they took her jobs.
They took our jobs. Yeah, they took our jobs. They took our jobs. They took your jobs.
And the one thing about Sweden that I must add is that Sweden, come on, it's a small country, it's a small economy. even though the GDP per capita is very high, it's an economy that has to be driven by innovation all the time, by innovation, because if they don't innovate, it's just going to fall back. So that's why you see all these investments in real innovative heavy industries. For instance, Spotify is a Swedish company. You have Swedish companies in gaming, you have Swedish companies also in the motor industry. You have Volvo, which has been innovating a lot when it comes to electric engines and such. So of course, the problem is that Sweden has to keep bringing fresh labor force, fresh, innovative, qualified labor force. And also, since the Swedish labor force is already so qualified, they don't want to, it's the very old rhetoric, they don't want to do the bad jobs, the low jobs or something like that. So at the same time, you have to keep up with this very qualified labor force. You also have to bring in some low qualified labor force to still keep the lower echelons of the economy working. The old examples, trash collection, construction, all that kind of of
McDonald's workers, those kinds of things.
So yes, so that's one thing that I don't know if I'm extending too much here.
And that's why the Middle East is the way it is.
Yeah, we're kind of traveling a lot here, so.
No, yeah, that's true. But it's kind of good and it's refreshing for people, so they don't have to be down and depressed so much about world issues.
I don't know if I should go for this or just shut up now. Because it's an interesting topic. No, it's just the idea that, I'm originally from Brazil, actually, and I'd say that this is very interesting. I think it really contributes to this part of the debate we're having here, that in Latin America, and to some extent the United States, you have a culture of assimilation of immigrants. Immigration has been around everywhere forever. It's not a new phenomenon. Of course, the scale and intensity has increased a lot in the last century, but immigration has always been around. And the assimilation is when the people become the melting pot. They become part of the culture. They contribute to the culture and all that. Because usually the national identity has been shaped by immigration so much. In Europe and maybe today, also in the United States, to some extent, you have a culture of integration, not assimilation. You already have a very well-established national identity, national culture. So it's hard for a foreign element to just contribute or to change that culture. So they have to integrate. They become. They learn your language, learn your culture, learn your costumes and all that, but your customs. But in the end, they're always going to be that people, those guys, that community, the Somali Swedes, Persian Swedes, and that's very common throughout Europe. It's not in Sweden only.
Yeah, and I often see that in the United States, and it kind of it upsets me to some degree, because I often see people say they're Asian American or they're African American, and I'm sitting here going, like, if you define yourself as that, then you're not truly accepting what you're a part of, because to be an American identity is to accept that we ignore where your heritage comes from, and we all accept that you have something to contribute to society and you're here, so join the team and let's just do something amazing. And I think that's the general idea of America, but then that gets misconstrued with bias and brutality and all that shit that comes with having minorities in a society and not having a homogenous society. There's all these tensions that seem to be arising, but that's a whole nother topic too, about race relations.
I think we really got to digress here.
Yeah. It's all good though.